Jake Morrison sat in his chair and watched the alien delegates argue. The massive hall on Zentara Prime held thousands of beings from across the galaxy. Each species had their own section. The Zelkari sat in their blue crystal chairs, their tall, bodies glowing with soft light. The Etherians occupied the golden platform, looking down at everyone else with their 4 eyes. The bug-like hive members clicked and buzzed in their dark corner. The Corvin warriors stood at attention, their thick armor making loud sounds with every movement. Jake was the only human in the room. His simple black suit looked plain next to all the fancy alien clothing. He had been Earth's voice on the Galactic Council for 3 years. 3 long years of watching other species treat humans like children who had wandered into an adult meeting. High Counselor Vexathari stood up from the Zelkari section. Her voice rang through the chamber like singing. "Lass, we must discuss the human problem once again. These newcomers continue to expand without permission. They build colonies where they should not. They ignore our guidance." The other delegates nodded and made sounds of agreement. Jake kept his face blank. He had heard this speech many times before. The humans have been in space for less than 200 years, Vexathari continued. We Zelkari have traveled the stars for 10,000 years, the Etherians even longer. Yet these children think they know better than their elders. Etherian Prime Minister Zelandros floated down from his platform. His golden robes shimmered as he moved. The Zelkari speaks truth. Humans rush ahead without thinking. They make mistakes. That cost lives. They need firm limits to keep them safe. Jake wanted to laugh. The Etherians had started 2 galactic wars in the past 1,000 years. The Zelkari had destroyed 3 entire star systems with their failed experiments. The Hive had enslaved dozens of species before joining the Council. But somehow, humans were the dangerous ones. Queen Mind Zarathes spoke for the Hive. Her voice came from 100 throats at once. The humans refuse to share their technology properly. They keep secrets. They work alone instead of joining the collective good. War Marshal Thex Iron slammed his armored fist on his podium. Their military grows too fast. They build ships with weapons we have not approved. They train soldiers in ways that break our rules of war. Jake stood up slowly. The arguing stopped. All eyes turned to him. He was much smaller than most beings in the room, but something in his movements made them pay attention. Earth has followed every law the Council has made, Jake said. His voice was calm and clear. We have paid every tax. We have limited our expansion to the systems you allowed us. We have shared our medical research freely. We have helped defend Council space from pirates and raiders. What more do you want from us? Vexathari's light grew brighter. You want too much, too fast. You should be happy with what you have. Learn patience from your betters. Our betters? Jake asked. You mean the species that needed human doctors to cure the Red Plague last year? The same plague that killed millions while your medical experts stood around and argued about which treatment to try first? The Zelkari delegate's light flickered with anger. That was different. The plague was unusual. It was simple, Jake replied. Our doctors fixed it in 3 days. But you still want to limit our medical research because we might discover something dangerous. Zelandros floated closer. Humans are too emotional, too quick to act. You need guidance from wiser minds. Jake looked around the room. Wiser minds like yours? The same minds that voted to ignore the Outer Rim crisis until it was too late? The same minds that let the Corvin Hive border war continue for 6 months because you could not decide who was right. The Queen Mind's voice buzzed with irritation. You speak out of turn, young species. Young species, Jake repeated. Yes, we have heard that many times, but this young species ended both those conflicts in a few weeks. While you debated, we acted. While you worried about protocol, we saved lives. Thex Iron stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. You forget your place, human. Jake did not step back. My place is as Earth's representative on this council. A council that votes on Human affairs without caring what humans think. A council that makes laws to limit human growth while praising other species for the same actions. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. The translation devices struggled to keep up. Through it all, Jake stood quietly and waited. When the noise died down, Vexithari spoke again. We will vote now on Resolution 847C. All human expansion into the Kepler, Vega, and Wolf systems is forbidden. Human military forces will be reduced by 30%. Human trade ships will require council escorts in neutral space. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was worse than he had expected. The resolution would trap humanity in their current systems forever. It would make Earth dependent on council protection for everything. The vote began. Species after species voted in favor of the resolution. The Zelkari voted yes. The Etherians voted yes. The Hive voted yes. The Corvins voted yes. Dozens of smaller species followed their lead. When the count finished, the result was clear. 847 votes in favor, 1 vote against. Only Earth had voted numbered Vexithari's light pulsed with satisfaction. The resolution passes. The human expansion is now limited by council law. Perhaps this will teach them humility. Jake looked around the chamber one last time. These beings thought they had won. They thought they had put the troublesome humans in their place. They were about to learn how wrong they were. He walked to the center of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the massive room. The United Earth Coalition hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then the chamber exploded in shocked voices. Jake continued speaking over the noise. All treaties between Earth and Council species are canceled. All trade agreements are void. All diplomatic relations are suspended. Earth thanks the Council for the lesson in humility. We have learned much. He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, aliens shouted questions and demands. Some called for security to stop him. Others laughed and said humans would be back. Within a year, begging for help. Jake reached the door and turned back one last time. The Council wanted to limit human growth. You have succeeded. Humanity will no longer grow within Council space. We will find our own path among the stars. The door closed behind him with a soft sound. In the chamber, the delegates stared at each other in confusion. They had expected anger. They had expected pleading. They had not expected this calm withdrawal. Keth Moran, the Zelkari trade minister, laughed first. Let them go. They will realize their mistake soon enough. Without council protection, the Rim pirates will destroy them. Without our trade networks, their colonies will starve. They will come crawling back before the year ends. Many other delegates agreed. Humans were like children having a tantrum. They would calm down and return when they realized how much they needed the council. None of them noticed that Jake Morrison was smiling as he walked away. Captain Lisa Bennett stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery and watched the stars change. Her ship was the last human vessel in Council space. Behind her, the great trade stations and diplomatic outposts that had connected humanity to the galaxy were going dark one by one. Final evacuation complete, Captain, reported her first officer, Commander Pete Davis. All human personnel have been withdrawn from Council territories. All embassies are closed. All trade posts are shut down. Lisa nodded. And the communication relays? Ready for shutdown on your order, ma'am? Lisa looked at the main screen. The quantum communication array that linked human space to the galactic network floated in the void ahead of them. It had taken 5 years to build and cost more money than some planets made in a decade. With one command, she would cut humanity off from the rest of the galaxy completely. Do it, she said. Pete pressed a series of buttons. The massive relay station powered down section by section. Its lights went out. its transmitters fell silent. The quantum field that carried messages across thousands of light years collapsed into nothing. "It's done, Captain. We're on our own now." Lisa felt the weight of that statement. Earth and its 127 colony worlds were now isolated from the galactic community. No news would reach them. No calls for help could get through. They were truly alone among the stars. "Set course for home," she ordered. "Maximum speed." As the Discovery jumped to faster-than-light travel, Lisa thought about the past 6 months. The withdrawal had not been easy. Some humans working in council. Space had not wanted to leave. They had built lives on alien worlds. They had alien friends and alien spouses. But Earth's government had been clear. Everyone comes home. The evacuation had been quiet and efficient. Humans simply packed up and left. They canceled their contracts. They closed their businesses. They said goodbye to their alien neighbors and departed without drama. Many aliens had seemed confused by the polite but final nature of the withdrawal. On Zentara Prime, the council delegates were still debating what it all meant. Most seemed to think it was a temporary tantrum. They expected humans to return within a year, humbled and ready to accept whatever terms the council offered. They were wrong. Dr. Ryan Torres sat in his laboratory on Earth and reviewed the data he had gathered during his last months on Zentara Prime. As head of xenobiology research, he had been trusted with access to many alien facilities. The aliens had thought he was just a harmless scientist studying their biology. They had no idea he was actually mapping their weaknesses. Every species had critical flaws. The Zelkari depended on rare crystals from their homeworld to power their technology. The Etherians had built their entire society around anti-gravity systems that required constant maintenance. The Hive could not function if their queen minds were separated by more than a few light years. The Corvins had impressive weapons, but terrible logistics. Ryan's real mission had been to learn everything about how the galactic community actually worked. Who controlled what resources? Which technologies were shared and which were secret? Where were the weak points in their economy and infrastructure? The report he had compiled was over 10,000 pages long. It contained the blueprint for either integration with galactic society or complete independence from it. Earth's leaders had chosen independence. 3 months after the withdrawal, the first signs of trouble appeared in Council space. On the Mabazi hive world of Praxis. 7 crops began failing. The agricultural scientists could not understand why. They ran test after test, but found no disease, no pests, no obvious cause for the declining yields. What they did not know was that the quantum fertilizers boosting their crop production had been developed by a small human company on New Kansas. The special blend of earth minerals and synthetic compounds had increased hive food production by 300% over the past 5 years. Without those fertilizers, the harvest was returning to normal levels. Normal levels were not enough to feed the growing hive population. Queen Mind Zara Thess felt the hunger of her people like a physical pain. The collective consciousness that linked all hive members meant she experienced every empty stomach, every worried thought about food shortages. She called for emergency meetings with agricultural experts from across the galaxy. The experts came, but could offer no quick solutions. They could analyze the failed fertilizers and eventually recreate them, but it would take years of research. The hive needed food now, not years from now. On the Corvin homeworld, Admiral Beth Parker's absence was causing different problems. She had been the human liaison to Corvin military development for 4 years. Her knowledge of human engineering principles had helped the Corvins design their newest class of dreadnought battleships. The first ship of that class, the Bloodfang, was ready for its maiden voyage. War Marshal Thex Iron himself came aboard to witness the test of their most powerful warship ever built. The test went badly. 30 minutes into the flight, the main engines began to overheat. The power couplings that Beth had helped design were failing one by one. Emergency systems activated but could not handle the massive energy loads. The ship's captain ordered an immediate return to port. The Blood Fang limped home on backup power, its pride destroyed along with its engines. The Corvin. Engineers tried to fix the problems but discovered they did not really understand how the human-designed systems worked. They had built the ships using human blueprints but had never learned the underlying principles. Without Beth Parker and her team, the Corvins could not repair their new fleet. Worse, they could not build any more ships of that class. Their military expansion program ground to a halt. On the Etherean capital world, Dr. Alex Rodriguez's absence created chaos in a different way. For 3 years, Alex had worked with Etherean scientists to develop adaptive algorithms for planetary infrastructure management. These programs controlled everything from traffic flow to power distribution to waste management. The algorithms were brilliant pieces of software that learned and adapted to changing conditions. They had made Etherean cities run more smoothly than ever before, but Alex had written most of the core code himself, and the Ethereans had never fully understood how it worked. When the first major update was needed, the Etherean programmers discovered they could not modify Alex's code without breaking it. The programs were too complex, too interconnected. Every change they tried caused unexpected problems elsewhere in the system. Traffic lights began malfunctioning. Power grids became unstable. Waste treatment plants overflowed. The perfect Etherean cities that had been the envy of the galaxy started falling apart. Prime Minister Zel Andros called for emergency repairs, but his best technicians could only offer temporary fixes. The real solution would require rebuilding all the infrastructure software from scratch, a project that would take decades. The worst problems appeared on the Zelkari medical stations. Dr. Nina Walsh had spent years developing hybrid medicines that combined human botanical knowledge with Zelkari medical technology. These drugs had revolutionized treatment for dozens of diseases and conditions. The Zelkari had the manufacturing facilities and the alien components, but the human plant. Extracts came from Earth's carefully maintained biolabs. Without those extracts, many of their advanced medicines simply could not be produced. Patients across Zelkari space began experiencing treatment failures. Diseases that had been easily curable became dangerous again. The Zelkari medical establishment, which had prided itself on being the galaxy's finest healers, watched helplessly as their capabilities diminished. High Counselor Vexathari called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. She stood before the assembled delegates and tried to project confidence, but her usual bright glow seemed dimmer than before. "These are temporary setbacks," she announced. "The humans have caused some disruption by their sudden departure, but we will adapt. We will overcome these challenges and emerge stronger." The other delegates nodded and made sounds of agreement, but many of them were dealing with their own human-related problems. Supply chains were disrupted. Technology projects were stalled. Trade routes that had depended on human intermediaries were breaking down. What made it worse was the complete silence from human space. Attempts to contact Earth received only automated responses directing callers to seek alternative solutions. Trade ships that approached the borders of human territory were politely but firmly turned away. Most disturbing of all, the humans had somehow managed to shield their entire region of space from long-range sensors. Council intelligence services could detect no activity within human borders. It was as if 128 human worlds had simply vanished from the galaxy. Chairman Mordak called for patience and careful planning. "The humans will return," he declared. "They cannot survive alone. They need our protection from pirates and raiders. They need our trade networks for survival. They need our guidance for growth. When they realize this, they will come back to us with proper humility." But privately, Mordak was beginning to worry. The humans had been more integrated into galactic society than anyone had realized. Their sudden absence was causing problems no one had anticipated. In the Outer Rim territories, The first pirate attacks began just 2 months after the human withdrawal. Captain Steve Harrison had commanded the Outer Rim Security Initiative for 5 years. His unconventional tactics and quick responses had kept DOS 1 year had passed since humanity vanished from the galaxy, and the problems were getting worse. Queen Mind Zarathes felt the constant ache of hunger from her people. The hive worlds that had once been the galaxy's breadbasket were now importing food from other species. The quantum fertilizers that had made their success possible remained a mystery that their best scientists could not solve. Dr. Maya Johnson had been the human expert who developed those fertilizers. She had combined Earth agricultural science with hive biotechnology to create something new and powerful. The hive had the manufacturing equipment and the biological components, but the key ingredient was a modified Earth bacterium that could only be grown in specific conditions. Without Maya and her team, the hive scientists could not recreate the process. They had tried for months, but every attempt failed. The bacterium would not grow properly. The chemical reactions would not complete. The fertilizer remained lifeless powder instead of the living, adaptive substance that had revolutionized agriculture. Zarathes called emergency meetings with agricultural suppliers from across the galaxy. The prices they quoted for replacement food supplies were crushing. The Hive Collective, which had always been self-sufficient in food production, now faced the choice between bankruptcy and starvation. On the Corvin homeworld, the military problems were becoming a crisis. The Bloodfang and her sister ships sat in dry dock, their advanced engines still broken. Corvin engineers had torn apart the power systems trying to understand them, but they only made things worse. Admiral Beth Parker had not just helped design the ships. She had trained the crews, developed the maintenance procedures, and created the tactical doctrines for using them. Without her knowledge, the Corvins had powerful weapons they could not use and could not fix. War Marshal Thexiron stood in the engineering bay of the Bloodfang and stared at the dismantled engine core. His best technicians had spent months studying the human-designed power couplings. They could see what the parts did, but they could not understand why they worked. The humans used principles we do not know, reported Chief Engineer Gorthak. Their power systems are not like ours. They channel energy in ways our physics texts do not explain. Thexiron slammed his fist against the bulkhead. Then learn their physics. Study their methods. I will not accept that Corvin engineers are inferior to human children. But weeks of study yielded no progress. The human engineering principles were too different, too advanced. The Corvins had built the ships using human blueprints, but they had never learned to think like human engineers. On Etheria Prime, the IA infrastructure collapse was accelerating. Dr. Alex Rodriguez's adaptive algorithms had controlled more systems than anyone realized. Traffic management, power distribution, water treatment, atmospheric processing, waste disposal, emergency services, everything was interconnected through his programs. The Etherian programmers had tried to replace the failing systems with traditional software, but the results were disastrous. Traditional programs could not handle the complexity of managing an entire planet. They were too rigid, too simple, too slow to adapt to changing conditions. Traffic jams that lasted for days paralyzed entire cities. Power outages became daily occurrences. Sewage treatment plants overflowed into water supplies. The atmospheric processors that maintained perfect air quality began producing smog and pollution. Prime Minister Zel Andros toured the capital city in his official transport and watched his perfect world crumbling. Garbage piled up on streets that had once been pristine. The crystal spires that had gleamed in the sunlight were now dark and powerless. Citizens who had never known discomfort were learning about inconvenience and hardship. How long to restore? The human systems? He asked his chief technician. Unknown, Prime Minister. We are trying to reverse engineer programs that took the humans years to develop. Even if we succeed, it could take decades to rebuild everything. The Zelkari faced different, but equally serious problems. Dr. Nina Walsh's hybrid medicines had become essential to their medical practice. Without the human plant extracts, their most effective treatments were becoming impossible to produce. High Counselor Vexithari stood in the central medical facility on Zelkari Prime and watched doctors struggle with diseases that should have been easy to cure. The Red Plague vaccine that had saved millions of lives required Earth-based compounds that could not be replicated. Cancer treatments that had achieved 90% success rates were now failing half the time. "Can we not synthesize the human components?" she asked Dr. Kelsa Andre, their leading biochemist. "We have tried, Counselor. The human compounds are based on Earth biology that evolved differently from ours. Their plant extracts contain molecular structures that our chemistry cannot replicate. We can analyze them, but we cannot make them." The irony was bitter. The Zelkari had always considered themselves the galaxy's superior healers. Now, they were watching patients die from diseases that humans had helped them cure. But the worst problems were appearing in the Outer Rim territories. Captain Steve Harrison's absence had created a power vacuum that pirates and raiders were quick to fill. The Corvan peacekeepers who replaced him followed standard military protocols that made them predictable and easy to avoid. The Rim pirates had learned to fear Steve Harrison's irregular tactics. He had used converted civilian ships, unconventional, weapons, and surprise attacks that broke every rule in the military handbook. His methods had been effective precisely because they were unpredictable. The new peacekeeping force followed proper procedures. They announced their patrols in advance. They used standard formations and tactics. They respected territorial boundaries and followed diplomatic protocols. The pirates adapted quickly and resumed their activities with little interference. 3. Major shipping lanes had become too dangerous for regular traffic. 2 mining colonies had been abandoned after repeated attacks. A border dispute between the Hive and the Corvan Federation had escalated into open warfare when peacekeepers failed. To mediate effectively, Admiral Kate Morrison, Jake's sister, commanded the Council's emergency response fleet. She studied the tactical reports from the Rim territories and shook her head in frustration. The peacekeeping methods that worked in civilized space were useless against criminals who ignored all rules. "We need different tactics," she told her staff. "The pirates are not following our playbook." "What do you suggest, Admiral?" asked her aide. Kate thought about her brother, Steve Harrison, and his unorthodox methods. "We need to think like humans." But thinking like humans was not something the other species found easy to do. Human tactics seemed chaotic and reckless to alien minds. The careful, methodical approaches that other species preferred were exactly what the pirates expected and prepared for. The council chambers on Zentara Prime echoed with heated debates about the growing crisis. Chairman Mordak called for calm and patience, but many delegates were losing confidence in his leadership. "The human withdrawal was supposed to be temporary," complained Etherian delegate Thorzen. "You said they would return within a year," humbled and grateful. "Instead, our problems multiply while they remain silent." Corvan Delegate Vectar stood and slammed his armored fist on his podium. "Our fleet is crippled. Our territories are under attack. Our enemies grow bold while we debate. Where are the humans when we need them?" "They will return," Chairman Mordak insisted. "They must return. They cannot survive alone in space without our protection and trade networks." But even as he spoke, intelligence reports were suggesting otherwise. Long-range reconnaissance missions to the edge of human space had detected massive construction activity. Energy signatures unlike anything in Council databases were appearing throughout human territory. Most disturbing of all, the sensor blackout around human space was not passive. It was active, powered, and sophisticated. The humans were not hiding in fear. They were deliberately concealing something. Dr. Sandra Walsh, Nina's sister, led a scientific expedition to study the human border regions. What her sensors detected defied explanation. The energy readings suggested industrial activity, on a scale that dwarfed anything in Council space. These signatures indicate stellar-scale engineering, she reported to the Council's Science Committee. The humans appear to be manipulating entire star systems. The committee members exchanged worried glances. Stellar engineering was theoretical, technology that the Council's most advanced species were still trying to develop. If humans had achieved it in just 1 year of isolation, they had surpassed galactic civilization by centuries. That cannot be possible, protested Zelkari scientist Dr. Vorthani. The humans were barely spacefaring when they joined the Council. They lacked the knowledge and resources for such projects. Sandra reviewed her data again. The readings are consistent across multiple sensor types. Whatever the humans are doing, it involves energy manipulation on a planetary scale. The implications were terrifying. If humans had developed stellar engineering capabilities, they no longer needed anything the Council could offer. They could create their own resources, build their own worlds, and power their civilization with the energy of stars themselves. But the Council delegates refused to accept such posse. 2 years had passed since humanity's withdrawal, and the galaxy was in chaos. The problems that had started as minor inconveniences had grown into major crises that threatened the stability of entire civilizations. On hive worlds across their territory, food riots were breaking out with increasing frequency. Queen Mind Zarathes felt every moment of hunger, every flash of anger, every surge of fear from her people, as if they were her own emotions multiplied by billions. The collective consciousness that had always been the hive's greatest strength was now amplifying their suffering beyond endurance. The agricultural crisis had spread beyond just the loss of quantum fertilizers. The hive had built their entire food distribution system around the assumption of abundant harvests. Storage facilities were too small. Transport networks were designed for surplus, not scarcity. When production dropped to normal levels, the infrastructure could not handle the shortfall. Emergency food shipments from other species helped, but the cost was bankrupting the hive economy. The collective had been forced to take out massive loans from Zelkari banks, using their industrial worlds as collateral. For a species that had always prided itself on self-sufficiency, the dependence on alien charity was deeply humiliating. Dr. Maya Johnson's agricultural techniques had done more than just increase crop yields. They had allowed the hive to support a much larger population than their worlds could naturally sustain. Now that population was slowly starving, and there was nothing the collective could do to save them. The Corvan Federation faced different but equally serious problems. Their military superiority had been built on advanced technology they could no longer maintain or reproduce. The broken dreadnoughts in their shipyards had become symbols of Corvan weakness rather than strength. War Marshal Thexiron stood in, the command center of the Corvan Defense Force, and stared at tactical displays showing their crumbling position. 3 border conflicts that should have been easily resolved had turned into prolonged wars. Enemy forces that should have fled before Corvan might were now standing and fighting because they knew the Federation's weapons were failing. "Status report," Thexiron demanded. General Korthax consulted his datapad with obvious reluctance. 60% of our advanced fleet is non-operational. Weapon systems are failing faster than we can repair them. Morale among the troops is declining as word spreads about our technical problems. The irony was bitter. The Corvans had always looked down on human military technology as primitive and weak. Now they would have given anything to have human engineers back to fix their broken war machines. Admiral Beth Parker's absence was felt in every aspect of Corvan military operations. She had not just helped design their ships. She had created their maintenance protocols, their crew training programs, and their tactical doctrines. Without her expertise, the entire Federation military structure was slowly collapsing. On Etheria Prime, the infrastructure breakdown had reached catastrophic levels. Prime Minister Zel Andros surveyed his capital city from his office window and barely recognized the world that had once been the crown jewel of galactic civilization. The crystal spires that had reached toward the sky like frozen music were now dark and lifeless. The anti-grav transport system that had moved millions of citizens smoothly through the air had broken down completely. People were forced to walk through streets clogged with debris and waste that the automated cleaning systems could no longer handle. Dr. Alex Rodriguez's adaptive algorithms had been more than just computer programs. They had been the invisible, nervous system that connected every aspect of Etherian society. Traffic control, power distribution, environmental management, emergency services, communication networks. Everything had depended on his software. The Etherian programmers had tried desperately to recreate Alex's work, but they were discovering that human thinking was fundamentally different from their own. Where Etherians created elegant, logical systems that followed predictable patterns, humans built chaotic, adaptive networks that learned and evolved. The human programs are alive, reported Chief Technician Mortez during a cabinet meeting. They change themselves in response to new conditions. Our replacement systems are static. They cannot adapt to unexpected situations. Zel Andros felt the weight of his people's suffering. The Etherians had lived in paradise for so long that they had forgotten how to endure hardship. Now they were experiencing discomfort and inconvenience for the first time in generations. And their society was fracturing under the stress. The Zelkari medical crisis had become equally severe. High Counselor Vex Thari walked through the medical centers on Zelkari Prime and watched her people suffer from diseases that should have been easily treatable. The Red Plague vaccine was completely exhausted. Cancer treatments were failing at alarming rates. Genetic disorders that had been corrected were returning to plague new generations. Dr. Nina Walsh's hybrid medicines had revolutionized Zelkari healthcare, but they had also created a dangerous dependency. The Zelkari had stopped researching alternative treatments because Nina's compounds worked so well. Now, without access to Earth's biological resources, their medical science was reverting to pre-human levels. How many more patients are we losing? Vex Thari asked the chief medical officer. The mortality rate has increased by 40% over pre-human baseline levels, Dr. Korthanis replied. We are seeing the return of diseases we had eliminated decades ago. The social impact was devastating. Zelkari society was built around the concept of healing and helping others. When their medical abilities failed, their entire cultural identity was threatened. Riots had broken out at medical facilities as desperate families demanded treatments that no longer existed. In the Outer Rim territories, the security situation had deteriorated beyond all recognition. Captain Steve Harrison's unconventional peacekeeping methods had maintained stability across dozens of star systems. His replacement commanders followed standard military procedures that the pirates and raiders had learned to exploit. Admiral Kate Morrison received daily reports of increasing violence and lawlessness. Shipping routes that had been safe for years were now too dangerous for civilian traffic. Mining operations were being abandoned as security costs became prohibitive. 3 separate wars between minor species had escalated because Council peacekeepers could not mediate effectively. The Rim territories are becoming ungovernable, Kate reported to the Council emergency session. Our peacekeeping forces are trained for civilized warfare, not the chaos that prevails in the outer systems. Chairman Mordak struggled to maintain order as delegates shouted blame and accusations at each other. The unity that had held the Council together for centuries was fracturing under the pressure of cascading failures. "This is all the humans' fault," declared Corvin Delegate Vectar. "They abandoned their responsibilities and left us to clean up the mess." "We drove them away with our arrogance," countered Etherian Delegate Thorzen. "We treated them like children and ignored their contributions." Queen Mind Zarathes spoke with the voice of billions of hungry hive members. Blame will not feed our people or repair our civilization. We need solutions, not arguments. But solutions seemed impossible to find. Every attempt to recreate human innovations had failed. Every effort to replace human expertise had fallen short. The species that had seemed so primitive and dependent had somehow become essential to galactic civilization. Most disturbing of all were the intelligence reports from the human border. Dr. Sandra Walsh led another scientific expedition to study the mysterious energy signatures emanating from human space. What she discovered defied all understanding of known physics and engineering. The readings are consistent across multiple star systems, she reported to the Council's Science Committee. The humans appear to be conducting stellar engineering on a massive scale. They are manipulating the fundamental forces of gravity, electromagnetism, and nuclear energy. The committee members sat in stunned silence. Stellar engineering was theoretical technology that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were still centuries away from achieving. The idea that humans had developed such capabilities in just 2 years of isolation was almost impossible to accept. Perhaps they have received help from an unknown alien species, suggested Zelkari scientist Dr. Vorthani. Sandra shook her head. The energy signatures are consistent with human technology patterns, but amplified beyond anything we thought possible. This appears to be a natural evolution of their existing capabilities. The implications were terrifying. If humans had achieved stellar engineering, they no longer needed anything the galaxy could offer. They could create matter and energy at will. They could build worlds from scratch. They could power their civilization with the very stars themselves. But the most frightening discoveries came from the reconnaissance missions that managed to return. The few scout ships that survived encounters with human border defenses brought back reports that challenged everything the Council thought they knew about warfare and technology. Captain Velthos of the Etherian scout ship Starweaver had approached the human border on a covert intelligence mission. His ship was detected almost immediately by sensors that should not have been able to penetrate Etherian stealth technology. We were scanned by energy beams that passed through our hull as if it did not. 3 years after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, a single ship appeared at the edge of Zentara Prime's sensor network. The vessel was unlike anything in Council databases, sleek and powerful, radiating energy signatures that made the station's instruments scream warnings about impossible power levels. Admiral Kate Morrison was on duty in the Orbital Defense Center when the alerts began. She had been expecting this moment for months, but seeing it happen still sent chills down her spine. "Sir, we have an unidentified vessel requesting permission to dock," reported her communications officer. "The ship is broadcasting human identification codes." Kate felt her heart stop. "Human codes? Are you certain?" "Yes, sir. The codes are valid, but the ship design does not match any human vessel in our databases." Kate studied the sensor readings. With growing amazement, the ship was generating power levels that should have required a small star to sustain. Its hull appeared to be made of materials that absorbed and redirected energy in ways that defied known physics. Most impossibly of all, it seemed to be partially existing in normal space and partially existing somewhere else entirely. "Grant docking permission," she ordered, "and send word to the Council immediately. Tell them the humans have returned." The ship docked with elegant precision, using docking fields instead of mechanical clamps. As Kate watched through the observation windows, a figure emerged from the vessel wearing what appeared to be a simple black diplomatic suit. But her trained eye caught details that made her question what she was seeing. The figure moved with fluid grace that suggested either enhanced physical capabilities or some form of personal gravity control. The suit itself seemed to shimmer slightly, as if it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And when the figure looked up at the observation deck, Kate felt certain that he could see her clearly through barriers that should have blocked normal vision. It was Jake Morrison, but something fundamental had changed about him. Within an hour, the council chambers were packed with delegates who had rushed to Zentara Prime from across the galaxy. The same hall where Jake had announced humanity's withdrawal 3 years earlier now buzzed with nervous energy as the galaxy's leaders waited to learn what had become of the species they had driven away. Jake entered the chamber alone, walking the same path he had taken during his departure. But where he had left in anger and frustration, he now moved with quiet confidence that made even the mighty Corvan warriors step back respectfully. His appearance was largely unchanged, but there was something in his bearing that suggested vast reserves of power held carefully in check. When he reached the center of the chamber, the nervous chattering of hundreds of alien voices fell silent. "Chairman Mordak," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the massive hall. "Distinguished delegates, I bring greetings from the Terran Federation and an offer of renewed diplomatic relations." Chairman Mordak leaned forward in his seat, trying to project authority he no longer felt. "Ambassador Morrison, the Council, is prepared to discuss the terms of humanity's return to galactic society. We are willing to consider modifications to some of the restrictions that were placed on human expansion." Jake smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I think there has been a misunderstanding, Chairman. Humanity is not requesting readmission to the Galactic Council. We are offering the Council an opportunity to join the Terran Federation." The silence that followed was so complete that the faint hum of the station's life support systems seemed thunderously loud. Delegates stared at Jake in shock, trying to process what they had just heard. War Marshal Thex Iron was the first to find his voice. "You speak of impossible things, human. Your species has been isolated for 3 years. You have no allies, no trade networks, no military support. What federation could you possibly represent?" Jake gestured, and the air above, the chamber filled with a 3-dimensional display that made the Council's most advanced holographic systems look primitive. The image showed a star map covering a region of space that dwarfed the entire Galactic Council territory. The Terran Federation currently encompasses 847 star systems across 4 galactic regions. Jake explained calmly. "Our population includes not only humans, but also 3 alien species that have chosen to join us as equal partners." The delegates gasped as the display zoomed in to show massive orbital installations that spanned entire star systems. Artificial worlds hung in space, like pearls on invisible strings. Dyson spheres partially enclosed stars, harvesting their energy for purposes beyond imagination. Queen Mind Zarathes spoke with the voice of billions of hive members. "This cannot be real. No species could achieve such construction in merely 3 years." "You are correct," Jake agreed. "No single species could achieve this. But humanity learned something important during our time in the Council. The value of true cooperation. We did not build this federation by conquest or intimidation. We built it through partnership with beings who shared our vision of growth and exploration." Dr. Elena Rodriguez materialized beside Jake, apparently beaming down from the human ship. Her appearance caused another wave of shocked murmurs as delegates recognized the impossible nature of such precise matter transportation. "The Zeleri from the Andromeda Galaxy joined us after we helped them escape a dying star system," Elena explained. "The Keth Morin Collective from the Outer Rim territories became our partners when we developed new forms of hive mind communication that enhanced their abilities. The Vorthan Empire allied with us when we shared our stellar engineering techniques." The names meant nothing to the Council delegates, but the implications were staggering. Humanity had made contact with alien civilizations that the galaxy's greatest explorers had never even suspected existed. High Counselor Vexathari's light flickered with confusion and fear. "How is any of this possible? When you left the Council, you were barely capable of interstellar travel." Jake's expression grew thoughtful. "That is the tragedy of the Galactic Council's approach to governance. You imposed limitations based on what you thought we were capable of, rather than allowing us to discover what we could actually achieve. The holographic display changed to show Earth as it had been 3 years earlier, a single blue world orbiting a yellow star. Then it shifted to show Earth as it was now, and the delegates gasped in amazement. The planet was still blue and green, still beautiful, but it was no longer alone. Massive orbital installations surrounded it like a crown of stars, ring-shaped. Habitats provided living space for billions of people. Industrial platforms harvested energy from the sun itself and converted it into matter and antimatter on an impossible scale. When humanity was freed from the Council's restrictions, we discovered that our greatest limitation had been our own acceptance of those restrictions, Elena continued. Within 6 months of our withdrawal, our scientists had achieved breakthrough, discoveries in faster-than-light travel, matter manipulation, and dimensional engineering. Dimensional engineering? Etherian Prime Minister Zelandros asked weakly. Elena nodded. We learned to build in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our cities exist in normal space, hyperspace, and several parallel dimensions. Our population capacity is effectively unlimited because we are no longer confined to three-dimensional space. The display showed impossible architecture, buildings that were larger inside than outside, transportation networks that connected distant star systems, through dimensional gateways, and manufacturing facilities that created matter from pure energy drawn from parallel universes. The techniques that seemed so advanced to the Council were actually primitive limitations, Jake explained. Human ingenuity, when freed from artificial constraints, proved capable of achievements that redefined what was possible. War Marshal. Thexiron stood up, his armor clanking. Even if this is true, what does humanity want from us? Why return to offer us anything? Jake's expression grew serious. Because despite everything that happened, we remember that you were our neighbors. We learned much from our time in the Council, even if the experience was often frustrating. Now we offer you the chance to learn from us. Chairman Mordak leaned forward desperately. What kind of arrangement are you proposing? Full membership. In the Terran Federation as equal partners, Elena replied. Your species would retain complete autonomy over your internal affairs. Your cultures, your governments, your traditions would remain unchanged, but you would gain access to Federation technology, trade networks, and exploration opportunities. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to drowning sailors. The delegates looked at each other with a mixture of hope and terror. Everything they had once possessed, the stability, the prosperity, the security, was being offered back to them. But the price was accepting that they were no longer the dominant powers in the galaxy. Queen Mind Zarathes asked the question that haunted every delegate. What if we refuse? What happens to our relationship with humanity? Jake's smile was gentle but firm. Then we part as friends and neighbors. The Federation will not interfere with Council affairs, but we will also not provide assistance with the